Today, Tampa, Florida lies at the center of a bustling metropolis of 2 million people. Journalists and commentators debate the area's future. But to chart the future of the new Tampa, one must first understand the history of old Tampa. The birth, growth, and development of Tampa required great sacrifices. We stand today on the shoulders of giants. Long before the city of Tampa, there was the land and water. Thus, it may seem inevitable that a great city would spring forth along the Tampa Bay. Nature has endowed Tampa Bay with an unmatched vitality and variety, a climate warmed by the Gulf of Mexico and cooled by sea breezes. Tampa Bay's 212-mile shoreline supports a complex ecosystem, blending and filtering fresh and salt waters into a vast and bountiful estuary. Tampa is both of and by the sea, with sandy beaches and a dazzling array of marine fossils. Dinosaurs never stalked the shores of Tampa Bay. Florida was underwater at that time, but an assortment of Ice Age animals arrived about 1 million years ago. Paleontologist Frank Garcia has unearthed many specimens near Ruskin, such as this reconstructed saber-toothed tiger. Approximately 10,000 years ago, humans appeared on a peninsula of land we now call Florida. Indians discovered a very different Florida than we know today. Because the Ice Age locked up vast amounts of water in the polar caps, ocean levels had dropped. Thus, the Florida landmass was larger than today. The shoreline extended about 50 miles farther into the Gulf. Traveling in migrating bands, Florida's Indians hunted large animals, fashioning impressive weapons, such as this 5,500-year-old Newman spear point found near Dover. Change came slowly to the Indians living in the Tampa Bay region. As ocean and Gulf rose to their present levels, Indians began to settle in villages. Tampa Bay, with its abundance of marine and animal life, attracted a significant number of Indians. From archaeological digs, we can identify changes in Indian lifestyles by new forms of pottery and tools. Local Indian pottery can be identified by its distinctive checked designs and clays. Tools and weapons made from bone, shell, and stone suggest that these local tribes were becoming more complex and specialized. The most visible evidence of Indian civilization in the Tampa Bay area can be seen by the surviving earthen temple and burial mounds. Scores of mounds constructed over long periods of time once dominated the shores of Tampa Bay. This mound culture allowed Indian priests to offer sacrifices to the gods and ensure good harvests. One such mound, 50 feet high and 100 feet long, towered over Tampa Bay from the present-day site near the downtown convention center and aquarium. Sadly, residents carried the mound away in the 1870s, using the shells and dirt to pave streets. Historians call the first Indians who inhabited the Tampa Bay area Tocobagas. The Tocobagas belonged to a confederation of Indians called the Tamaqua, who ranged from Tampa Bay to northeast Florida. We know more about the Tamaqua because of illustrations drawn by a Frenchman in 1564. The Tamaqua, for instance, enjoyed grilled foods on a grate, a word and custom we call barbecue. Note the unusual variety of broiled meats. Indians also engaged in vigorous sporting activities, including a spirited game of ball whereby players attempted to throw or bat a ball into an eagle's nest. The Tocobagas' fierce enemies, the Calusa, lived south of Tampa Bay near what is now Charlotte Harbor. The Calusa left behind many artistic treasures discovered a century ago on Marco Island. These South Florida Indians carved realistic-looking wolves and panthers. Interestingly, the name Tampa is a Calusa word. However, we're unsure of its precise meaning, whether it meant a body of water, a chief's nickname, or even an insult. Tragically, contact with Europeans proved fatal to the Tocobaga, Calusa, Tamaqua, and every other Florida Indian. The arrival of Spanish explorers, missionaries, and colonists in the 16th century devastated the Indian population. Lacking immunity to diseases of the Old World, Tocobagas died in their first encounter with smallpox, tuberculosis, measles, influenza, and malaria. By 1800, all of the original Florida Indians were gone, victims of disease and conquest. Who was the first European to set eyes upon Tampa Bay? Juan Ponce de Leon may have sighted the bay in his explorations of 1512 and 1521, but evidence is sketchy. In 1528, Pánfilo de Narváez received authority from the King of Spain to explore and colonize La Florida. The one-eyed, red-haired conquistador, a veteran of the conquest of the Aztecs in Mexico, led the first invasion of Florida and North America. Landing at Tampa Bay in April 1528 with several hundred well-armed soldiers, Narváez unfurled the Spanish banner and christened Tampa Bay La Bahía de la Cruz, the Bay of the Cross. Narváez also brought war dogs, trained to hunt Indians. After destroying several local villages, the Narváez expedition marched to its doom. In North Florida, near St. Mark's, Narváez, tired of the unpromising search, ordered boats to be built. A storm drowned many of the Spaniards. Only 3 men survived the journey back to Mexico. One was Cabeza de Vaca, who wrote a famous memoir of the affair. Another was an African slave, Estevanico de Durante, the first black man to explore the present-day United States. A decade later, one of the grandest of all the explorations in North America had its entrada, its beginnings at Tampa Bay. In 1538, Hernando de Soto organized an expedition which brought 600 soldiers, priests, and colonists, including 2 women, to La Florida. Landing near present-day Ruskin, de Soto sought to find gold, silver, and fame in Florida. He had already achieved great wealth as a participant in the conquest of the Incas. But Florida was no Peru. Alas, the 3-year trek across half a continent turned up little gold, and de Soto died on the march in 1541. Tampa Bay richly deserved both of its 16th century nicknames, the graveyard of Spanish dreams and the gateway to North America. Other Spaniards arrived, more interested in souls than silver. Priests and missionaries had accompanied the earliest Spanish expeditions. In 1549, Fray Luis Cancer de Barbastro embarked for Tampa Bay, now called La Bahía Espíritu Santo, Bay of the Holy Spirit. The missionary brought along several dedicated assistants. In June 1549, the friars landed and celebrated the first recorded Mass in Florida. But the missionaries became martyrs. Tocobaga warriors, angry over mistreatment, slaughtered the priests. In the long run, Indian contact with Spanish soldiers and missionaries proved disastrous. The local Indians vanished after 1600. But the encounter between Indians and Spaniards, the exchange between the New and Old Worlds, also produced positive results. Africans and Europeans introduced new flora and fauna. These new plants and animals changed Tampa Bay. New animals found a niche, such as pigs, horses, and cows. Indians introduced Europeans and Africans to new foodstuffs, such as turkeys, pineapples, corn, potatoes, chili peppers, peanuts, and tobacco. Tampa Bay must have seemed a bewildering and fascinating land for colonists and explorers, with exotic new forms of animals and plants. In 1763, following the 7 Years' War, victorious England acquired Florida from Spain. Florida had become a bargaining chip in the game of empire. The British began renaming rivers and islands. The Hillsborough River, and later county, honors Wills Hill, the Earl of Hillsborough, the British Secretary of State. While the American Revolution commanded the attention of the 13 colonies, Florida reverted back to Spain. Few visitors came to Tampa Bay. For a few months a year, Cuban fishermen came ashore to smoke and dry mullet and pompano. Spanish Town Creek, located near Magnolia Street and Bayshore Boulevard, commemorates the memories of the long-gone fishermen. Interrupting the solitude of Tampa Bay was an occasional visit by pirates. Pirates? Annually since 1904, Tampans have celebrated a festival in honor of the lusty pirate Jose Gaspar. Who was this legendary pirate who rumor suggests marauded treasure ships off the west coast of Florida between 1780 and 1820? Was today's Captiva Island near Gasparilla Island a haven for the pirate's harem? Alas, Jose Gaspar is pure myth. While pirates did sail Florida's waters, there's no evidence of one Jose Gaspar. In 1904, Tampans inaugurated the Gasparilla Festival, creating and inventing as they went along. Myths, however, have meaning. Jose Gaspar represents the end of Spanish Florida and the introduction of new faces, the United States. In 1821, Spanish Florida ended when the United States acquired the territory of Florida. Modern Tampa begins. Today's Tampa owes its origin to Fort Brooke. In 1823, the War Department directed James Gadsden to find a suitable site on Tampa Bay to erect a military fort. Gadsden chose a spot on the east side of the Hillsborough River, where the river flows into the bay, the site of today's downtown Tampa. Named for George Mercer Brooke, a military commander, Fort Brooke served as a military post, trading center, and frontier city for South Florida. Seminole Indians, a tribe which had moved into North Florida only in the late 18th century, had been pushed to the Tampa Bay area by force of treaty and threat. The Seminoles left a rich legacy, including place names such as Sonota-Sassa, place of flint, and plant cities Hickapusasa, fields of tobacco. The Seminoles called the Hillsborough River Lachsapapka, river of acorns. Soldiers who served at Fort Brooke left behind many letters and descriptions of the area. Everyone praised the garrison with its canopy of ancient live oaks. Wrote Lieutenant George A. McCall, "Here we have the most charming weather imaginable. It is a paradise for those who love to live in open air." Soldiers enjoyed picnicking along the river and especially atop the ancient Tocobaga Temple Mound, where the Army built a pavilion. The first 4th of July, celebrated in 1824, seemed promising. Officers in full dress uniform and Seminoles in colorful smocks and turbans toasted tributes to American presidents and Indian chiefs. Chief Neamathla graciously toasted President Monroe. The peace proved short-lived. By the early 1830s, the American government demanded that the Seminoles be removed from Florida and relocated to the west. The issue divided the Seminoles, and increasingly, one individual began to speak for the defiant Indians. Osceola emerged as one of Florida's greatest leaders. The child of a Scottish father and Creek mother, Osceola counseled war in 1835. He visited Fort Brooke frequently, once escaping from the stockade, and he understood the weaknesses of the U.S. Army. Osceola orchestrated the first strike. In late December 1835, Major Francis Dade departed Fort Brooke with 110 men heading to relieve a besieged Fort King at Ocala. The Seminoles attacked near present-day Bushnell. The Dade massacre resulted in the deaths of 107 American soldiers. The Second Seminole War had begun. Fort Brooke grew rapidly during the Seminole War as recruits, traders, and camp followers flocked to the region. The war served as a proving ground for the later Mexican and Civil Wars. Succession of officers destined for future fame won their spurs at Tampa. Many of Tampa's streets recognize the achievements of officers such as Winfield Scott and David Twiggs. Sack Street honored General and President Zachary Taylor, nicknamed Old Rough and Ready. The costly war ended in 1842. Hundreds of Seminole men, women, and children, captured and imprisoned at Fort Brooke, left in ships headed for western reservations. The war brought change to the region. Towns grew from military outposts. Fort Harrison begot Clearwater. Roads, however crude, penetrated the interior. Statehood for Florida followed in 1845. A new age dawned along the Florida frontier. Fort Brooke diminished in importance as the village of Tampa rose to significance. In 1855, the last Seminole War flared, called the Billy Bowlegs War in honor of the Seminole chieftain. More Seminoles died or were deported. By 1858, only a handful of Indians remained in the Everglades. Large numbers of pioneers and settlers arrived after 1842, attracted by the offers of free land. The Armed Occupation Act rewarded settlers with 160 acres of land, provided they homestead the region. Tampa lay on the cutting edge of America's newest frontier, a collection of diverse people held together by the rigors and challenges of pioneer life. The Florida legislature had created Hillsborough County in 1834. A humble wooden courthouse followed. John Jackson surveyed the growing town. Downtown streets paid homage to Revolutionary War heroes, Marion, Franklin, Morgan, and Lafayette. But also early town officials, such as William Ashley, the city's first clerk. Tampa's fortunes rose and fell in war and peace, boom and bust. The worst natural disaster occurred in 1848 when a hurricane swept away the fort and village. Juliet Axtell, daughter of the Fort Brooke chaplain, wrote her sister, "What a scene of destruction Tampa is. The